Oh, I think I'm very definitely a Canadian filmmaker, and what's more, I'm a kind of Eastern Canadian filmmaker. I think it's definitely had a huge impact on what I do and how I approach things. And the fact that in Toronto I feel literally and figuratively halfway between Hollywood and Europe. And I think those influences come together in my movies, and sometimes they're a little more European and sometimes they're a little more American, but I think there's a mixture of those. The relationship of Canada to Europe is quite different than the American relationship is. And when you think of England, for example, where Eastern Promises was shot, Canada, you know, we never had a revolution against England, and we still have the Queen of England on our money. You know, so we have a quite different relationship from America. So when I go to London to shoot a movie, there's a strong connection, I think, stronger than any American would have with London and English society and culture. It's quite different. As I say, audience reactions are very unpredictable, and that's part of the excitement of making a movie. I mean, you're in control only up to a certain point. I've never thought of it the way Hitchcock liked to present it, which is that he's like the puppeteer and the audience is his marionettes and he controls every reaction. Well, that wasn't true of Hitchcock really, but he liked that, to take the position of being master controller, you know. I don't have that feeling. I feel that it's a collaboration between me and my audience, and I don't know what they're going to bring to the collaboration because they're so varied and so unusual. You know, people bring their whole life to a movie, their culture, their religion, what they've read, what they've seen, everything. And so I'm just interested in the reactions. I don't really get upset when somebody has a reaction that I think is strange or oblique or they missed the point or so on. It is satisfying, of course, when somebody can, let's say a critic, can write really beautifully about what you've done in a way that might surprise me, like reveal things to me that I didn't know, but is positive. You know, that's you love that, of course, but you expect anything.
She was 14. Read the diary. She was 14 when he raped her. You bastards murdered her.
Uspokój. Anger is very dangerous. Makes people do stupid things. Please, forget any of this ever happened. You're in very wrong place, Anna Ivanovna. You belong in there, with nice people. Stay away from people like me.
The most serious acting I've done, strangely enough, was, well, a Canadian movie called Last Night, Don McKellar, and really in Clive Barker's film Nightbreed, because I spent 3 months in London being an actor. I've never spent that long, especially on location, just being an actor. And that was a very interesting experience for me that way, very illuminating. But I don't do a lot of acting, so it's not, if a really seriously intense role that required a lot of time, I mean, I think of actors who I admire, which are most of the ones I've worked with, but you know, just to go back as to Vigo or to Ralph Fiennes and so on, the intensity and the devotion and the attention to detail and the research that those actors do is really quite phenomenal. And if I were ever to tackle a serious role that wasn't just a day or two on the set like Jason X, then I would hope that I would do it with that kind of intensity. But you have to be prepared to give up the other aspects of your life when you're doing that. I mean, it really is more than a full-time job, and I'd have to decide whether I was willing to do that. I don't know if I now would be, but if the right role came along, I might give it a go. Yeah, well, doing a commentary is an odd thing. It's a very odd thing because it puts you in a strange perspective viewpoint, which you never ever really have when you're making the movie. And you also never really have when you're watching the movie. So it's an odd vantage point that you take when you're doing a commentary. When I do them, I try to be as absolutely honest and open as I can possibly be about what I was feeling, what I was thinking, all of those things, and all the random connections that you can possibly make. But for any movie that I've made, I could probably do 100 hours of commentary. Really, I could go through the whole movie and go through it again and go through it again, and each time the commentary would be quite different. Just as honest each time, I think, but quite different.
Have you ever met a girl called Tatiana?
I met a lot of girls called Tatiana.
She was pregnant.
Ah, in that case, no, I never heard of her.
She died on my shift.
But I thought you did birth.
Sometimes birth and death go together. She came in with needle punches all over both arms. Probably a prostitute, at the age of 14. Do you think Semyon's son knew her?
I'm driver. I go left, I go right, I go straight ahead, that's it.
We'll take the next right.
My orientation is more literary than it is cinematic. That's not a value judgment of any kind. It just depends, you know, where you get your inspiration from. But of course, I've seen so many movies. I've absorbed so many movies. There's no doubt that there's a huge influence. But in terms of the use of language and the level of intellect that you can have in a novel, or in fact in a book that's not a novel, because there's some fantastic books, for example, that I read in preparation for doing Eastern Promises. I didn't see movies in preparation for Eastern Promises. I read a lot of books, from Dostoevsky to a book called Black Earth, which is a sort of a journalistic essay on Russia. Fantastic book. These were very stimulating to me, and somehow got embedded in some way in the movie. And I wasn't really looking at gangster movies, or it's true that once in a while Viggo Mortensen and I would look at a Russian movie, you know, because there were a couple of Russian gangster movies. That was more to get the tone of the language and the body movement and everything, rather than an inspiration per se. I don't particularly like movies that are remakes of movies. You know, I mean, movies that all they say is, I love movies and I love the movies of this era, and so I'm making one that's like that. To me, that's not a good enough reason to go through the agony of making a movie. It's got to have something more to do with real life and deeper things, I think. So that's my own take on it. No, I prefer not to have any of my movies remade, frankly. I mean, I didn't even want there to be a mini-series based on the Dead Zone, since I had done it. But I think that's just normal. You get kind of territorial about what you've done. Of course, I've done a remake myself of doing The Fly, so it's a kind of hypocritical of me, I suppose, to say that. But I think that's normal. I mean, I don't think Kubrick would have been happy to see a miniseries of The Shining either. You know, it's just the way it is. Because also you worry about people being confused about which version is what, you know, and that's just a kind of pragmatic thing. They think they're getting your movie and they get the other movie instead, you know. But I don't have control over some of my early movies, and so if they get made, that's it. But I don't really have anything to do with them. Well, I'm directing an opera of The Fly, actually. So talking about remakes, this is a remake of my movie as an opera. Music by Howard Shore, who did the music for the original movie that I made, which is in itself a remake, of course. And David Henry Wong, who wrote M. Butterfly, has written the libretto, and I'm merely the director. I really think opera is the composer's medium, so in this case, I'm just trying to get the best out of the beautiful music and the libretto that exists. It's very different. It's a very theatrical experience, working with singers who are not necessarily actors first, they're singers first. And there was a suggestion of using video and big screens and big video and stuff for close-ups, and I said, forget it, you know, I did the movie already. Now, if we're really going to do stage, let's do stage. I want the theatrical experience, the challenge of that, so it's just going to be the stage, you know.